My passion for geek history, especially rescuing forgotten geeks from the trash can of pop culture, inspires me to make this story of George Westinghouse very personal. Today's pop culture history machine shoves him into the margins, or worse yet, makes him a villain in the War of Currents. That's just wrong. It's an injustice to one of the most important engineers and industrialists that America has ever seen. Westinghouse was every bit the geek in the Gilded Age, a time when the term industrialist was synonymous for robber baron with a top hat. Westinghouse proved you could build an empire without treating your employees like slaves. He didn't have Edison's ego. He didn't have Tesla's theatrics, but he didn't need them because he was respected by his employees, admired by his peers, and trusted by the people who actually worked with him. And for me, this story is more than just some research I did looking up a Wikipedia article. I grew up in Western Pennsylvania, surrounded by the companies and the technologies that Westinghouse himself created. I've traced the roots of Westinghouse and his legacy back to the time it happened, and through my own 50 years of studying the man, I have a passion for getting his story correct. So, let's get rid of the pop culture. Let's get to the real truth about the man himself, George Westinghouse. Can you handle the truth?
Let's get set, go!
George Westinghouse grew up in his father's machine shop in upstate New York. School bored him. Machines didn't. A foreman took young George under his wing, giving him the tools and encouragement to build water wheels and steam engines right there in the shop. That hands-on education shaped him far more than any classroom ever could. At the age of 14, he tried to run away to join the Union Army, but his father stopped him, temporarily, of course, because by 16, he went on to serve in the New York Cavalry, and later became an engineer in the Union Navy. After the war, he tried college, but he hated it and dropped out during his first term. He went back to the machine shop, where he realized the real learning happened. Later in life, Westinghouse would say the best education he has was the ability to work in his father's shop. By 19, Westinghouse had his first patent, a rotary steam engine. By 21, he invented a car replacement thing called a reversible frog that made railroads safer and more efficient. And at 22, he would patent the invention that would change the world and make him famous, the air brake. In 1868, Westinghouse moved to Pittsburgh, not for fame, not for fortune, but to find steel. He needed better, cheaper steel to manufacture his railway inventions. While he was there, he developed a railroad air brake, the system that allowed trains to stop safely and more reliably. Westinghouse's greatest invention was the air brake that saved countless lives and made modern railroads possible. Before the air brake, riding a train was a crazy, dangerous adventure. There was a person called a brakeman who would jump from train car to manually turn a valve to slow down the train, one car at a time. Stopping the massive trains took a tremendous amount of time and space. And even more sadly, thousands of brakemen died every year. The railroads saw the lost lives of the brakemen as part of the cost of doing business. This attitude shocked Westinghouse. His goal was to make railroads safer, and he fought the initial resistance of his air brakes because the trained people thought they were too costly. But eventually, the air brake became law, and the Westinghouse Air Brake Company succeeded. The system spread across the world, and variants of his design of the railroad air brake are still being used today. Going on from railroads to natural gas, he became fascinated with natural gas to the horror of his wealthy neighbors in Pittsburgh when he started drilling gas wells in his own backyard at his Pittsburgh estate called Solitude. Of course, his wife Marguerite thought it was pretty cool because he was drilling the gas wells in her own backyard. He could work from home without having to go somewhere else. In his lifetime, he secured more than 30 patents in the field of natural gas. What he learned from natural gas distribution helped him with his greatest leap in alternating current. While Edison was busy tearing down Westinghouse with propaganda and publicity stunts, Westinghouse was quietly building his AC infrastructure, the infrastructure that would power the modern world. In our section on the War of Currents and other videos that I have done, I talked about the enormous investments made by Westinghouse in developing alternating current. The money he made from the air brakes and other inventions, he deeply invested into making AC current a reality. He invested heavily hiring brilliant engineers, and he invested in Nikola Tesla when no one else would. Without Westinghouse, who knows where AC power would have went and if Tesla would have ever become a star. With AC power, the 20th century would be a much different place. The legacy of Westinghouse was that of a rare industrialist, an ethical man, a generous man, a humane man. In 1881, he introduced the 5.5-day work week, giving workers Saturday afternoons off for personal development and community life, something that was unheard of in his day. Westinghouse saw it happening in England and thought, why shouldn't American workers have this too? Another difference between Edison and Westinghouse really hits home when people raise the question of who holds the most patents, George Westinghouse or Thomas Edison. Westinghouse was happy to point out that in his companies, employees were allowed to register patents in their own name, something employees of the Edison companies did not have the privilege. Patents filed for inventions while working for Edison were done in the name of Thomas Edison. So the question of how many patents would George Westinghouse have if everything was registered in his name has been raised in numerous biographies of Westinghouse. One of the points that's often raised is that Edison boasts he has 1,000 patents. George Westinghouse personally held over 300 patents. But if you remember from our previous episode when we mentioned that Chief Westinghouse engineer Benjamin Lamy himself had 162 patents in his name. According to a 2009 Westinghouse corporate profile, during the 20th century, Westinghouse engineers and scientists were granted over 28,000 patents. Ironically, Westinghouse had 2 patents that were issued after his death. In 1916, he was issued a patent for an automobile air spring, and in 1918, he was issued a patent for an automatic train control. But George Westinghouse never sought fame. He didn't chase the headlines. A quote that's reproduced in several biographies of Westinghouse, including the Library of Congress, makes this statement that George Westinghouse said. If someday they say of me with the air brake, I contributed to civilization, something to the safety of human life, that alone will be sufficient. In the end, ethics don't protect you from your bankers. During the panic of 1907, J.P. Morgan, the banker that turned the theme "too big to fail" into a business model, that same financier who squeezed Edison out of Edison Electric, would force Westinghouse Electric into receivership. The During the Panic of 1907, companies like Westinghouse Air Brake were debt-free and untouchable. But unfortunately, Westinghouse Electric was carrying a lot of debt, and that allowed the opportunity for J.P. Morgan to strike. Loans were called in, cash ran short, and the newspapers that J.P. Morgan owned ran editorials blaming Westinghouse for poor business skills. And the bankers led by J.P. Morgan pushed him out of the company he built. Westinghouse stayed on as president of the company for a few years, but his heart was gone. By 1911, he was no longer active in business. As his health declined, he moved to upstate New York, where he died in 1914 at the age of 67. But the people who worked for Westinghouse, who knew who he was, they remembered him. The Westinghouse Memorial in Pittsburgh was funded not by bankers, not by politicians, but by over 50,000 employees. And in that monument, it states an enduring testimonial to the esteem, affection, and loyalty of the employees of the great industrial organization of which he was the founder. Westinghouse was the practical, ethical, quiet genius who built the modern world from the city of Pittsburgh. He didn't rub elbows with the bankers and the prestigious of his day, like the people we remember more often, the Nikola Teslas and the Thomas Edisons of this world. Westinghouse was happy to be in Pittsburgh and being respected by his employees. To live in an era where robber barons were people who rubbed people till they got the most out of them. But guess what? Westinghouse didn't. He did crazy things, like giving his employees better working conditions of their day, giving them better things like half days off on Saturday, which was unheard of during his day. He was appreciated in his day to the point that the companies of Westinghouse, the employees of the companies of Westinghouse, built him a memorial after his death in the city of Pittsburgh. 50,000 of his own employees pulled their money together to build what now stands in Pittsburgh as the Westinghouse Memorial. That was their testament and their thank you to the man they knew. So the next time you flip on a light switch and see that light bulb flicker, remember the geek from Pittsburgh who fought for the war of currents, made Tesla's dreams possible, and brought AC current to our houses. That, my friends, is the true legacy of George Westinghouse. A man who built companies that lasted, who treated workers like human beings, and a man who powered the modern world. A man that history has pushed into the margins and would rather have you forget, but we're not going to let that happen. Thanks for joining us today as we help you explore another forgotten geek. And there's more along the way. Don't forget, like and subscribe, and we'll have more stories to tell. Have a great one.
Let's get cynical.